Howdy. Welcome to Ausgrave Royalty. I am Justin. Here we are with another video, the fourth video in our fourth season on Jung's Answer to Job and Edinger's Archetype of the Apocalypse. So this episode is about God's marriage, and this is getting pretty abstract, so I always encourage it, but specifically for this episode, seeing the previous episodes will give valuable context to what the hell we'll be talking about in this. FYI. So, we're going to be continuing the theme of humanity bearing the burden of being the other by which God learns about himself during his own individuation process. So the theory goes. And this is what the last episode was about. Now, in the last episode, we talked about what the experience of that is like at the individual level. But now we'll be talking a bit about the archetype of the city. And also, we'll be talking about a figure named Sophia, which I had never heard of. Not that I'm a biblical scholar or anything, but you know, coming from my philosophical background, I thought Sophia was, you know, just philosophia, right? Philosophy, love of wisdom. But I didn't know it was an actual figure in the Bible. And also, continuing along the same conceptual path, we'll introduce what a prefiguration is in this context, which we'll also cover in more detail in the next episode. Prefiguration, that's a term that gets thrown around. Excuse me. So, first, the fact that Sophia translates literally as wisdom is no coincidence. Namely, think about how little wisdom was shown with Job, right? You could think of Sophia as, and this is from the Jungian perspective, God's counterpart, his consort, his wife, his other half, etc. And as a matter of fact, Edinger asserts that you could read Jung's essay on marriage and compare what he states in that and apply it to this godly marriage with Sophia. Furthermore, it's important to know that the concept of a marriage is alchemical. And fans of the channel will know that I've been wanting to do a series on alchemy forever. I have episodes on alchemy here and there. Recently, I think it would be Aphrodite is the alchemical goddess from Bolen. That's season 3. And then I definitely have a big one on it in season 1 about transformation in alchemy. They're scattered here and there, but I have plans to release a pretty gigantic season on alchemy, which is in the works, but I'm one small mammal with one small mammal wearing many hats. So it's coming soon as I can. Anyway, but yeah, marriage is an alchemical term, and it means like the union of the male and female, and the union of opposites in alchemy forms the conjunctio, and which we won't be getting into this season. For those who don't know, Jung actually wrote extensively on alchemy and cited its teachings as vital in the formation of his own analysis and psyche the way he did. So Edinger says, Yahweh's two wives are Israel and Sophia. Just as the self has two wives, the ego has two wives. I think what that refers to is this. The two wives of the ego are the outer partner and the inner partner. The same thing then applies to the self. The self has two wives. The ego is the outer wife of the self, and the eternal consort is the inner wife of the self. That would correspond in biblical terminology to Israel as the outer wife of Yahweh and Sophia as the inner consort of Yahweh. And we'll unpack this, but Jung says, the city is Sophia, who was with God before time began, and at the same time will be reunited with God through the sacred marriage. The faithfulness of his people becomes more important to him the more he forgets wisdom. Excuse me. One misses Sophia's love of mankind more than ever. Even Job longs for the wisdom which is nowhere to be found. Job marks the climax of this unhappy development. He epitomizes a thought which had been maturing in mankind about that time, a dangerous thought that makes great demands on the wisdom of gods and men. The victory of the vanquished and oppressed is obvious. Job stands morally higher than Yahweh. In this respect, the creature has surpassed the Creator. As always, when an external event touches on some unconscious knowledge, this knowledge can reach consciousness. The event is recognized as déjà vu, and one remembers a pre-existent knowledge about it. Excuse me. Something of the kind must have happened to Yahweh. Job's superiority cannot be shrugged off. Hence, a situation arises in which real reflection is needed. That is why Sophia steps in. She reinforces the much-needed self-reflection and thus makes possible Yahweh's decision to become man. It is a decision fraught with consequences. He raises himself above his earlier primitive level of consciousness by indirectly acknowledging that the man Job is morally superior to him, and that therefore he has to catch up and become human himself, aka the moral superior position. Had he not taken this decision, he would have found himself in flagrant opposition to his omniscience. Yahweh must become man precisely because he has done man a wrong. He, the guardian of justice, knows that every wrong must be expiated, and wisdom knows that moral law is above even him. Because his creature has surpassed him, he must regenerate himself. As nothing can happen without a pre-existing pattern, not even creation ex nihilo, which must always resort to the treasure house of eternal images and the fabulous mind of the master workman, the choice of a model for the son who is now about to be begotten lies between Adam, to a limited extent, and Abel, to a much greater extent. Abel is not the authentic archetype of the son, so well-pleasing to God. He is a copy, but the first of the kind to be met with in the scriptures. So, TLDR, Job catalyzed God's reunion with Sophia, which in turn catalyzed God's commitment to all mankind, of which Adam and Abel were the mere primitive beginnings of. And Jung mentions that nothing can happen without a pre-existing pattern, which resides in a treasure house of eternal images. So what the hell does all that mean? It means Jung is saying that there are these patterns. It reminds me of Plato's forms. These patterns are what God is drawing upon as the divine drama plays out, even from the start of creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. This has this all has more intimate implications for us, as we know that God is largely equated with the self, that deep, infinite dwelling of psychic knowledge which pulses within all of us. And it's important to keep this symbolism in mind as we move forward, that this divine drama is an allegory for humanity's interaction with individuation and the unconscious. And what I also thought was important about, one of the many things in that passage was that, I'm trying to find the right, let's see. Yeah, the more, trying to find the right part of it. One moment. Sorry. I just read it and I can't find the sentence. I'm scouring in a panic trying to find it as soon as possible. But it was about the outer partner and the inner partner. That the more... Basically, the more that God is focused on the outer partner, like Israel and mankind, that outward focus is equated with God's unconsciousness. So the fact that he's so preoccupied with mankind is a symptom of unconsciousness, whereas a reunion with Sophia introduces that inner partner that is God's capability of his own self-reflection. So the more Sophia there is, the less obsessive God becomes with mankind itself. So, thanks for your patience there. Edinger says, just as we can consider Yahweh to be the masculine personification of the collective unconscious, so we can consider wisdom to be the feminine personification of the collective unconscious. So this brings us to the archetype of the city, of which the archetype of the city, which is a feminine aspect. Edinger says, we have here the image of Yahweh as the husband and Israel as the wife. Job then becomes the individual personification of Israel, and Yahweh treats Job the way a jealous husband treats a wife, putting her to the test to see if she is really faithful to him. You may remember from Ion that Jung stated that the anima or animus can be realized only through a relation to a partner of the opposite sex, because only in such a relation do their projections become operative. The same idea can be applied to the psychology of Yahweh as Jung traces it. He had a consort. His consort was Sophia, but he forgot about her, or more precisely, he never really knew her. Just as the ego, in order to become conscious of the contraception other, must experience a real encounter. I think that's supposed. Sorry, I had to type not contraception, contrasexual. I'll have to double check the exact quote in the text, but yeah, sorry about that. must experience a real encounter with the opposite sex through a relationship. So must Yahweh do the same in order to become conscious of his other. Because Yahweh is eternal and immortal, his other is temporal and mortal. He needs that other in order to become conscious of his inner contrary. And just as the hieros, the divine marriage, again, that's an alchemical term, just as the hieros unites Yahweh with Sophia, thus restoring the original plerormic state, so the parallel description of God and city points to their common nature. They are originally one, a single hermaphroditic being and archetype of the greatest universality. So it's a lot to unpack. But yeah, do your own research on all this. It's too much for just one episode or even one series. I mean, again, I've said this before, but there's a stand-up comedy term, killing your babies. Like, I can't include everything, and I had to really be fierce about what I did include because there's just so much good stuff. But TLDR, the city represents an affair God is having with a part of himself that he'd forgotten. Let me say that again. The city, like in this, in the context of what we're talking about, represents an affair God is having with a part of himself that he'd forgotten. That being Sophia. The city is a feminine, earthly, mortal manifestation of Sophia, thus his other. As it represents his other, it is exactly what God needs to engage with in order to continue to individuate. And understanding all this, God will, so the theory goes, begin to incarnate in all of mankind to continue the dialectic with himself via the other, via us. So remember that quote we've talked about before, how whoever encounters God has an effect on him, right? As we, each human, individuate, that is, making the unconscious conscious, we are literally and collectively changing God. I've always felt that individuating has a divine purpose. And I didn't think of it in these words, but something like that. A sense that there's something more pure about understanding yourself and your human condition as best you can. If we are made in God's image, and this is me talking, then it follows to me that understanding yourself equates to enthusiastically engaging with God's works. Thus, individuation is worship. After all, is there any higher compliment to the artist than engaging with his works? And yeah, let me know what y'all think in the comments below. That's sort of just a thought that came to me quite naturally, engaging with the text. Again, that learning, I say this a lot, but we're talking about all this lofty stuff, right? And it can be construed as New Age, and that label means impractical. But what am I trying to say here? Setting that as bearing that in mind, what I'm trying to say is that there's a practical benefit for... It's kind of like being an unconscious person is like leaving your Christmas gifts under the tree wrapped, right? And the nature of a present, the nature of a present is that it wants to be, the nature of a wrapped present, I mean, there's kind of an implication there, but the nature of a wrapped present is it wants to be discovered. It wants to be unwrapped. There's something impure about a wrapped present that is never unwrapped by its receiver. Metaphorically, there's something offensive or uncool or less aesthetically consistent about being an unconscious person, or more precisely, even more offensively, is not even trying to unwrap the present, right? I hope I'm making sense. But you could see, like, you could see this as being conscious as an ego, as a mere human, is an unwrapped present, right? And life, as it plays out, is an unwrapping of that real present. And you know, like, how you tear it open, you start, oh, I wonder what this is. You feel the weight. Like, there are rumblings. There are, like, the shape of it. Like, you're getting a sense of what this present could be as it manifests in your day-to-day practical experience. Again, what we fail to make conscious will be acted out unconsciously in the world, and we'll call it fate, right? So if we leave this gift of unconscious potential, of unconscious mineral, for lack of a better term, it's a waste, you know? It's offensive. And if this is how God, so to speak, outputs his products, literally his productions, what he's produced in us, if it's a malfunction, the function of his product is that it unwraps it like itself, and they're unwrapping each other. This metaphor is getting a little wild, but you see what I'm saying? Like, as we interact with each other, there's projection going on, and we can be either on board for the ride consciously with what's happening to us in terms of what is our projection, like what are we projecting, actually doing that individuation process. We can either make that a conscious project and begin unwrapping ourselves and opening ourselves up to the tremendous infinite resources of God, aka the unconscious self, so the theory goes. If we don't, we remain unconscious, and that buried secret gift remains a wrapped present, and that's a waste. That's offensive. And you could say, along in this context, that that's offensive to God, that the more unconscious a human is, the more offensive to God they are. A tremendous amount of energy from the most powerful being ever, that there ever could be, so the theory goes, was put into that plan, that purpose. That's how the product works. again, you could see it as God being incredibly selfish, that he made this creation with like programmers call it a back door, right? That he can slip into and puppet, at any time and take over. He made all these products so that he could, and he did this unconsciously, which is, again, isn't that interesting? So I'm just connecting this dot, right? But if we take Jung's premise that, whatever we fail to make conscious will be unconsciously acted out, and we will call it fate, in bearing that in mind, what if God created mankind unconsciously? Unconsciously, God unconsciously created us because unconsciously he knew that this is how he would individuate, but he acted it out externally. Maybe that answers the question that plagues physicists. Why is there something rather than nothing? Because, something takes energy. Why overcomplicate it when nothingness is much more simple, so to speak, right? Maybe that answers the question. Maybe God was maybe the whole reason why we're here, so the theory goes, is an act out. And I mean that in the psychological term, acting out. Someone unconscious losing their temper. In the same vein of unconsciousness, God acted unconsciously and created humanity because he knew that was the key. He unconsciously knew. And he acted it out in the external. That is, made it matter, made it literally matter. There's a pun there. So that he can engage in his own individuation, right? Is that wild or what? I hope that made sense. I think it did. I think I just had like a live moment of like this awesome epiphany, but maybe I'm inflated. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what y'all think of all that. I know I'm ranting a lot, but I'm average Joe. I'm average intelligence. I'm trying to wrangle all this with y'all. I'm learning this with y'all. So I have in my notes here, like, it's even more profound when you then add the dynamic of the artist engaging with his own external work, and that his own creation is having an effect on him. I've said on the channel before, and you can check out my previous videos, and I'll have a link to my SoundCloud below, but I make, as a hobby, digital music. And I love it. And I do listen to my own music. And it's like, philosophically, what the hell is that? It's like the artist regurgitating this external creation from his own internal psyche. And then now the creation is external, but it's now an other for the very artist that made it. But now, since it's the other, and I listen to my own music, I'm drawing on psychic relationships as I engage with that track, and it makes me feel a certain way and all that. This came from me. Like, the track came from me. So you think, what can I learn psychically or vibe with psychically when the essence of it came from me, the person who's listening to it, right? Isn't that wild? Like, on a very microscopic scale, I think that's what is going on with God and his creation, mankind. Anyway, that was a lot of ranting, but I think valuable. Let me know in the comments below, and I will see y'all in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.